won't be very convincing. I expect you hear a lot of such talk from relatives.
All the time.
I don't suppose it would matter to you if I pointed out that nowhere in here is there any real proof that Tony and Janet had been drinking.
There was a lighted barricade across that road, ma'am. Anyone sober would have seen it.
That's a mighty definite statement.
I'm sorry for you, ma'am, but a man has been killed.
And he was a very good friend of yours. I think I understand.
All you understand, ma'am, is that you've got a granddaughter who's in trouble. Maybe a few years ago, when I first entered the force, I would have been more inclined to listen to you.
What difference do the years make?
They mean I've seen it all, and I mean all of it. Hot rodders racing themselves to an early grave. Reckless drivers trying to see how many they can kill. And the nicest people in the world who get tanked up and try to make a deadly weapon out of their automobile. But no matter how guilty they are, they always have friends and relatives try to set them free so they can do the same thing over again. Ready?
Mr. Nelson, what is going to happen to you on that day after you've ruined a person's life, that you find out you've been wrong?
I'm afraid I'm not thinking that far ahead, ma'am. All I know is that Jack Miller is my best friend and he died in my arms. Maybe you can't understand how I feel.
I think I do understand. Will you two gentlemen come inside a moment? This is a picture of my husband, taken 43 years ago, the day before he was killed. Maybe murdered, I'm not sure. I met John nearly 50 years ago. I was engaged then to another man, Will Gage. But the moment I met John, I knew that he was the one. It was a good life, until the day Will Gage talked him into that hunting trip. It was right here on this divan where they brought John a few hours later. He died here, with his head in my arms. A hunting accident, Will Gage called it. He cried a lot and said that although he'd never forgotten how John took me away from him, it had been an accident. People around here liked John, and all I had to do was to say that I thought Will was lying, and they'd have strung him up. But I didn't do it, Mr. Nelson. I could have been wrong, just as you could be wrong now. Thank you, Mr. Matthews, for all you've tried to do for Janet. And thank you, Mr. Nelson, for coming to listen to an old woman.
Well, maybe I could be wrong. Goodbye, Mrs. DeMcGorry.
Just call me Maggie.
I had the feeling that Maggie had softened Nelson up, but I wasn't sure. As a last resort, I obtained a court order to take the prisoner to the location of the accident in an effort to arrive at the truth.
I'm sorry, Bart, it's no use. You can see for yourself. Anyone sober would have seen that light.
But I tell you, I know there was no light when I came around that curve.
And I'm telling you, I was standing right here where I am now watching the flames when we heard the car coming.
Now, this is getting us nowhere. Now, let's go over the whole thing once more.
Okay. We were cruising the area. We noticed the wind had blown the lamp out, so we stopped to light it.
Now, like this.
Now, around here a little further.
Are you sure it was lit before the accident?
I'm positive.
All right, and exactly what happened after that?
We heard the car coming.
Mrs. Fraser, would you mind showing me once more just where you were when you first saw the officer?
Yes, sir. When we came around the curve, they just appeared out of nowhere.
You can see the skid marks.
All right, and what happened after that?
I jumped. Jack didn't have a chance.
Nelson, would you mind getting into your car and driving up to this point in the manner in which you think Mrs. Fraser drove?
Not at all. You don't think it'll prove anything.
Well, did it prove anything?
Proves Mrs. Fraser was right. She couldn't see that light. Nobody could. Miller was blocking it from her view.
You know, being wrong is nothing to be ashamed of. Just as long as you're man enough to admit it.
I'd kind of like to be the first one to tell her, Bart.
Looks like she's already guessed.
No, I mean Mrs. DeMagori. Just call me Maggie. I'd like to be the one she hears it from.
You know, my guess is you're the one she'd want to hear it from. Patrolman Nelson filed an amended accident report. The death of Patrolman Jack Miller was declared accidental and Janet Fraser was released. As for Patrolman Don Nelson, he was given a citation of merit for his diligence to duty in seeing that justice was done. The case you have just seen was brought to a fair and just conclusion through the efforts of a public defender.